Hi Nancy, this is Clark, this is my presentation, this is my audience, these are my cousins and my sister and her fiance. And I'm going to be giving my speech, my persuasive speech on self-medication. So to start, I'd like to read a quote from Mason Cooley, who was an author and an aphorist, which I don't really know what that means. But Mason said, "Our vices are attempts to combine self-medication and enjoyment." And I'd like you all to think about that really quick. Our vices are attempts to combine self-medication and enjoyment. And as I was reading this quote, as I came upon it, it really struck me. Because when my speeches today on self-medication is a persuasive speech. My purpose is to help you understand that you are all in danger of destructive self-medication and to be aware of it and then to change in such a way that you can protect yourself from destructively self-medicating. And in that quote I love because it says our vices, the things that bring us down, the things that we can't live without, are our own attempts, our personal attempts to combine self-medication and enjoyment. And I've seen in my life and in the lives of others how what the World Health Organization describes as our greatest asset in the medical community become our greatest weakness. And that is self-medication. That is the ability or the choices that we make to try to overcome sicknesses or illnesses or even other things, emotional crises, physical crises, with self-medicating. And as I said in my informative speech, self-medication is not just pharmaceutical or clinical. Self-medication, I believe, 80% of the time is other things that we do to self-medicate, like exercise and eating and diet and these other things. But what I'm going to talk about today specifically is different ways that self-medicating can go from being a benefit to something destructive, something that binds us down and brings us, that changes us. And so what I want to focus on first is why self-medicating becomes dangerous, why it is, how it changes from something that can help us, something that we need. It's essential, it's very essential for all of us to self-medicate positively, but how does it change? And from what I've seen in my experience is one of the biggest ways where it changes, where it switches, is when it goes from being self-medicating to help with something into self-medicating to escape from something. When you are self-medicating with different things, whether it be very, exercise or music or movies or even to illegal drugs, illegal things, that when you switch that to use those things to escape from life and from responsibilities, that's when it becomes dangerous. There's a study on alcoholism done by it was a journal entry that I read online where a man was talking about his own alcoholism and how he uses alcohol to escape. And it was done on Here to Help was the website, and he was talking about how different alcoholics, how most of the time, 80% of the time alcoholics, they self-medicate with alcohol to escape from life, to escape from their responsibilities, whatever it is, they use it to get away from the responsibilities and the things that they have. And that is a clear example of when self-medicating becomes destructive. And it's easy to see how alcoholism is terrible and how it destroys families and how it really, it's not a good way to self-medicate. But it's not something that you slip into easily. It's not something that is, you're an alcoholic. I mean, there's been a lot of studies about people who are genetically, inclined towards becoming an alcoholic, but it's not something that comes quickly. On the second part about self-medication and when it becomes destructive is, like I said, it starts by you're looking for an escape, but it usually becomes something that develops into a habit. It can be something simple. It can be something like focusing on alcoholism, this one drink just at the end of the day. It can be with a meal. And then eventually it goes into more and becomes 2 drinks and 3 drinks and 4 drinks until eventually it becomes something that you can't live without. You can't go a day without having an alcoholic drink. And that is the second time, or the second way where self-medication becomes destructive, when it becomes a habit, when it becomes something that you can't live without. There is the World Health Organization did a study on the assessment of medicinal products for use in self-medication. And one of the things that they found was that when it becomes a habit, when it becomes something you can't live without, is when it becomes dangerous, and when it goes from being self-medicating to becoming an addiction. And when it becomes that daily necessity, that's again when it becomes something that is terribly dangerous. The third way that self-medication can be dangerous and can be destructive is when it becomes a cycle, when it becomes part of a cycle of things that you can't break free from. It can be a habit. It can start with alcoholism. It can be a habit, but then maybe you need to do something else to break free from the alcoholism. So instead, you start to you start to take other supplements, something that'll help you stay away from alcohol, and that becomes a habit, and then it breaks into that and that. And there's a study done by Darkey called Pathways to Heroin Dependence, Time to Reappraise Self-Medication. This is a really interesting study that talks about how self-medicating or prescribing medication to youths and to other adults, how that can change from self-medicating to lead them to pathways to addictions, things like heroin. It shows how when children are youth, they have symptoms, they have problems, they have sicknesses, and so they get prescribed different pills and different medications. When they're prescribed these medications and they grow up and the symptoms change, they get prescribed different medications. And then eventually the kids they're looking to self-medicate because that's how they were trained as a youth to control their life, their environment. And so because of that, then they go and they start looking for ways to self-medicate, and they start looking in the wrong ways, and so they start, and it eventually leads to heroin abuse, is what Darkey, that's his claim. And it's really interesting to see how that happens and how it's true. It happens all the time. I have a very good friend of mine who had that happen to him. He started as a young man with very different medical symptoms, was prescribed different prescriptions, and because of that, he had to counteract some of the symptoms that came from that. So he had to take more pills, and eventually he kind of lost himself. And eventually, after about 12 years, he completely just shut himself off from all the prescriptions and all the pills, and it was terrible. It was really, really hard. And he struggled for about 1.5 years. But he eventually was able to break from that cycle. And so I know that all of us need to be able to self-medicate. We need to be able to control the symptoms and the things that are in our lives. But at the same time, it's very, very important that we understand that we are all susceptible to detrimental self-medication or destructive self-medication. And so my purpose in giving this speech is to help inform you of the dangers of destructive self-medication and to persuade you to think about the different ways that you self-medicate and think about how you cope with life. And I want to persuade you to remove the destructive ways that you self-medicate from your life, whatever it may be, to sit down and think about it and then to change it. Thank you.